There are places on this earth where the very stone seems to rebel against the story we have written for our ancestors. In the ancient granite quarries of Aswan, beneath the relentless Egyptian sun, a colossal monument lies frozen in its excavation. It is not a temple or a statue, but a wound in the landscape, a project abandoned over 3,000 years ago. They call it the Unfinished Obelisk, and to stand at its edge is to feel the weight of a terrifying industrial silence. Had this stone giant been raised, it would have reached nearly 42 meters into the sky, dwarfing every other obelisk known to history. Its intended weight, estimated at almost 1,200 tons, outstrips the lifting capacity of many modern cranes. Yet the true mystery of Aswan is not the sheer scale of this shattered monolith, but the precise, almost surgical scars left beside it. As you trace your fingers over the ancient quarry floor, logic begins to fray at its edges. The stone bears the marks of a technology that should not have existed in the Bronze Age, a signature of impossible geometry. We are taught to imagine slaves with pounding stone balls and patient copper chisels chipping away the ages to shape these rocks. No copper saw blade, no matter how tirelessly dragged back and forth, can easily slice through such a brutal density. And yet, here in the dust, we find perfectly straight trenches, scooped-out bowls, and polished surfaces that gleam like a dark mirror. These are the tracks of a ghost, a technological fingerprint left by a civilization that seemed to master stone as if it were wet clay. The unfinished obelisk is the keyhole through which we peer into a fog of ignorance, a puzzle that deepens the longer you look. Let us retreat from the monumental giant for a moment and turn our gaze to the surrounding quarry floor, the oldest industrial workshop on the planet. Here we find the distinct tool marks known to archaeologists as scoop marks, deep, curved hollows scooped directly out of the hard granite blocks. These are not random chisel gouges born of frantic labor. They are systematic, parallel, and eerily uniform in their curvature. The mainstream historical narrative proposes that workers hammered these stones with dolerite balls, a much harder rock, to pulverize the granite. Dolerite pounders have been found in massive numbers, tumbled and worn smooth from centuries of percussive impact. You can almost hear the rhythmic, deafening roar of 1,000 men swinging heavy stones in the heat, a brutal symphony of attrition. The conventional model appears sound until you notice a terrifying anomaly that lurks just beyond the obvious scoop trenches. Beside these rough craters lie areas of the quarry where the granite has been removed with a precision that percussion cannot explain. There are planes of separation so flat and smooth that a precision spirit level today would barely register a gap. These are surfaces that seem to have been cut, not pounded, drawn across the stone like a hot knife through wax. An archaeologist once placed a sheet of paper against a vertical quarry face here and found no unevenness to catch the edge. How do you achieve a flatness tolerance measured in fractions of a millimeter with a 10-pound dolerite ball swinging on a rope? The very question feels like an insult to the sweat and tears of the ancient workers, yet the physical evidence remains an unrelenting judge. This is the moment where the Aswan mystery fractures into two irreconcilable paths: the path of accepted history and the path of forbidden engineering. In this view, the scoop marks were created in tandem with wood, water, and brute force, a technique known as fire setting. Workers would build a fierce blaze against the granite wall to heat the surface, then douse it with freezing water to fracture the stone. The bruised, stressed surface could then be pounded away with dolerite hammers to shape these immense, cathedral-like excavations. This failure was not merely a mistake. It was a scar on the divine authority of the pharaoh, a monument abandoned to the contempt of silent gods. And so the unfinished obelisk remains today, a testament to the limits of a great empire's power, lying exactly where it fractured 3 millennia ago. This is the logical, evidence-grounded framework taught in universities, a narrative that places human ingenuity and suffering at its core. But the powder-fine dust of Aswan does not easily settle, and there are whispers in the wind that carry a far stranger, more disquieting hypothesis. Move your gaze from the scoop marks to a feature that many visiting tourists overlook, hidden in plain sight among the rubble. Near the unfinished obelisk, there are mysterious vertical shafts drilled straight down into the solid granite bedrock with absolute precision. These core holes, some of which reach deep into the earth, exhibit a spiral grooving on their interior walls. The marks look alarmingly like the striations left by a modern diamond-tipped core drill, cutting into the rock at a terrifying rate of advance. The orthodox explanation points to a tubular drill made of copper, combined with an abrasive slurry of quartz sand, spinning endlessly under a wooden weight. This is a perfectly sound principle of lapidary work. The soft copper embeds the hard sand, which does the actual scratching of the granite. According to meticulous measurements by skeptical engineers, the spiral pitch implies the bit plowed downward by a few millimeters per revolution. That penetration rate is astonishing. It is a feed pressure into the stone that seems incongruent with a delicate bronze tube and loose sand. If the tube was spinning sluggishly under a large stone weight, the tool should have seized up, or the sand would have simply been crushed to inert dust. The mathematics of friction and torque become a nightmare when one tries to recreate the efficiency suggested by the grooves in the quartz-heavy granite. Some researchers theorize that the dynastic Egyptians may have possessed a vibrational or ultrasonic cutting component embedded in their forgotten toolkits. They point to the strange tuning fork shapes found in some tomb reliefs, or the precisely machined schist discs discovered in Saqqara as circumstantial evidence. This is a boundary where archaeology bleeds into high-tech speculation, a gulf that separates a society of rope and ramps from one of harmonic resonance. Where archaeology faltered, the symbols on the Egyptian tomb walls began to fuel a deeper, more esoteric labyrinth of interpretation. They whisper of the iron of Set, or the boat of the soaker, objects used by the Netcheru to shape the bones of the earth. Mythology collides with geology here. Is it a cultural memory of an advanced prehistoric epoch, or simply a religious metaphor for divine creation? A darker hypothesis suggests that the Aswan quarry is not a site of primitive industry, but a salvage site of a lost super-civilization, a world before the pharaohs. Proponents of this lost technology theory insist the scoop marks were made by gigantic, machine-driven circular saws or energy beams that vitrified the granite. They point to the glass-like glaze sometimes found on ancient stone surfaces, arguing that only intense localized heat could produce such a rapid melting of quartz. Mainstream science counters that this sheen is merely the chemical patina of time, an exfoliation accelerated by the relentless desert wind and oxidation. And so, the war of evidence and interpretation rages on under the Egyptian sun, and the stones remain utterly silent, keeping their manufacturing secrets sealed. We find ourselves at a philosophical dead end, where the tools we have discovered do not rationally explain the finished products we have monumentally witnessed. The Aswan megaliths, therefore, are not just quarries. They are the fossilized remnants of a methodology so advanced it has become invisible to our modern logic. To look upon a perfect 90-degree internal corner carved into single-piece granite is to feel a deep intellectual vertigo. No chisels, no pulverizing hammers, no ancient scraping can produce an internal square without leaving a radius or a flaw, unless the stone was somehow softened. It is here, in the sharpness of these impossible angles, that the human mind confronts the absolute limits of its historical certainty. This mystery does not merely haunt the stones. It haunts the human beings who have dedicated their lives to solving the granite riddle. Engineers and artisans, like the late Christopher Dunn, walked these quarries armed with industrial guillotine gauges and precision measuring instruments. They were not mystics looking for a fairy tale. They were machinists searching for the signature of the manufacturing process itself. Their conclusion, as controversial as it remains, was that these stones reflect the operational signatures of high-speed rotary cutting and even ultrasonic attack. The psychological toll of proclaiming such a theory is immense. A career risk that places a researcher in direct conflict with the guardians of academic doctrine. Conversely, the Egyptologists who spend a lifetime excavating mud brick tombs and faience workshops view the lost technology idea as a dangerous insult to human achievement. They argue that discounting the cumulative genius of 10,000 workers over a century is a form of cultural vandalism, stripping the ancients of their ingenuity. Both sides look at the same granite block, the same scoop mark, and see a different universe staring back at them. It is a war of perception, a dark mirror reflecting not just the facts of Aswan, but the biases we carry deep within our own consciousness. There is a profound obsession here, a human need to believe either in the steady, meaningful climb of civilization or in the haunting possibility of a fallen golden age. The workers who died shaping this quarry, their lungs filled with granite dust, would perhaps laugh at our confusion, or perhaps they would weep. They knew the secret, a tangible, physical process that was as mundane to them as the spinning of a wheel is to you. Yet the secret died with them because the language of technique is oral, physical, and sensory, and it evaporates completely when a trade collapses. What we view as mystery is simply the terrible silence that follows a sudden cultural extinction event. Even if we were handed the lost stone-cutting machine, we would be missing the embodied intuition of the master artisan who wielded it. Long shadows fill the deep scoop trenches, and the wind whistles through the abandoned core holes like a breath through a graveyard of answers. You stand before the unfinished obelisk, the largest single piece of human engineering ever attempted, and the world feels strangely unbalanced. The sheer audacity of the extraction is eclipsed only by the breathtaking precision of the failure that left it stranded here on its limestone bed. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, that history is a solved puzzle slowly being pieced together by diligent minds. But the megaliths of Aswan do not agree with this comfortable narrative of progress. They sit beneath the mantle of the Milky Way, a technological cipher left behind by a people we may know less about than we dare to admit. Perhaps the truth of Aswan does not lie in choosing between the copper chisel and the lost machine. Perhaps the truth lies in acknowledging that human intelligence, when focused through a lens we no longer possess, can achieve what we mistakenly label as magic. The granite endures, a material so heavy that it seems to distort the very flow of time around it, preserving the snapshot of a single catastrophic moment of collapse. We are left staring into the abyss of our own ignorance, hearing the echo of hammerstones that may have been the finish work, but not the shapers of worlds. The unfinished obelisk remains a symbol of a project too great to complete, not just for the Egyptians, but for our own comprehension of their abilities. As darkness finally swallows the quarry, the temperature drops, and the granite releases a faint cracking sound, as if the ancient stone is still settling, still keeping its clockwork of secrecy. We are merely visitors in the lost workshop of a technological ghost, forever haunted by stones too perfect to explain.